All right, folks. I want to talk to you about the Tao Te Ching, one of our course texts, one of the great books of world literature, about 2,500 years old. It's been read by tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, possibly over the centuries as a source of wisdom and insight um, into the nature of the self, the nature of the universe, purpose of life, how to live one's life. Um, The lecture I'm going to give now, I actually heard from my best friend. He has studied Taoism, this book, carefully in his life. And a few years ago, when he came to visit me, and he learned that I was teaching this book in my classes, he offered to come to my classes and give a lecture on the book because he had actually been to China to study the book um, with a personal mentor. And has a deep love for the book. In fact, he has said to me, and he said to my classes when he did give that lecture, that the book had saved his life. And so my goal is to try to communicate some small portion of what he communicated when he came to my classes to talk about the book. And much of what I share today is simply taking notes that I took listening to him. Normally, when I give this lecture, I begin by introducing him, by talking about him and his life story, so that my students can better appreciate why the book is so important to him, how the book came into his life, and why it had the impact that it did. My personal relationship with the book extends back a few years when I taught a section of English 1A at Foothill College. And I had collected different texts from around the world that are thought of as part of this tradition that we could call wisdom literature, wisdom lit, where people have written down ideas, um, philosophies, if you will, that have become a source of wisdom to humanity over the centuries. And so I had Greek philosophy and the sayings of Jesus and stuff from the Bhagavad Gita from India and Roman philosophers. Anyway, it was a wide range of texts. And one of the texts that I selected was the Tao Te Ching. Looks to us like Tao Te Ching, I know, but I've been told that pronunciation is a little different. It's something closer to Tao Te Ching. So, but I'm sure even that's terribly wrong. Um, so I developed an affection for the book myself, teaching it in that class. It was one that a lot of the students liked. So I decided to continue to use it. And I often use it in my classes at the beginning of class for students to just sort of at the beginning kind of do a little reading. And as if you've looked at the book at all, as you can see, it's made up of a bunch of short little passages. So we'd read a passage and then do some reflective writing. What do you understand from what Lao Tzu, who is the original author of the book? Stephen Mitchell is actually the translator, not the author. Um, uh, what do you take from it? How do you relate it to your life? And it's been a nice way to kind of start classes and to do things. I rarely have students read it outside of class. Um, we just do some reading in class to kind of get our minds into that space of reading and writing. And then when Brad came and gave the lecture, I developed a whole new appreciation for the book. And because it can be at times a confusing or bewildering book, I have decided to sort of carry on what Brad gave, what he did for those particular classes that one semester, that one quarter. I've decided to try to give that to my classes ever since, whenever I use the book. So what you hear from me now will have been taken 95% of it directly from Brad's lecture and the notes that I took, listening to him talk to my students about the book. I absolutely never use PowerPoint. Frankly, I don't like PowerPoint in a classroom setting, and there's a lot of research to support not liking it. It's actually not a great way to learn. But I'm going to use it today a little bit to present some of Brad's ideas, things I would normally write on the board to help students understand what can at times be a confusing or ambiguous or strange text. If you've read the book at all, you know that at times the book sounds like, I sometimes compare it to Yoda from Star Wars, sort of says these cryptic things. And, it's kind of, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it sounds interesting. So I will be sharing the screen. Let's begin with the first thing that Brad said when he came and spoke to my students, which was that, well, actually, the mentor that he had when he went to China for a few months to study the book and to meditate during a very difficult time in his life, the end of his marriage. The mentor said, Brad, when you look at this book, what do you think? And he looked at it, and he saw this. And so he said, oh, it looks like poetry. And so the first point that the mentor made was, Brad, the Tao Te Ching is not poetry. It is a how-to book. When I think a how-to book, yes, a how-to-live book. So it is not meant to be poetry, sort of like a pretty decoration to your life. It's meant to be a very practical, hands-on guide for living. And when you read these passages, they are not like reading a Shakespearean sonnet. They are meant as life advice. And so with that perspective in mind, let's move on to some of the ideas. I'm going to sort of talk about them first and then go to the PowerPoint screen and we'll take a look at them. The first thing that Brad said, he said, before we get to the title of the book and things like that, he said, I want to talk about Taoism in general, which is this sort of philosophy that is a product of this text and some other texts. And, any philosophy or religion, one of the primary things that it does is it tells us how to be happy, right? And so Brad sort of started there. What is the purpose of Tao Te Ching? What is its big message? What is its overall point? And he began by explaining that in Taoism, there are two key words to understand in order to appreciate Lao Tzu's whole kind of theory of the self and theory of the world. And he said the two key words, the first key word is change. And according to Lao Tzu, you read the book, what characterizes the world, the nature of the world, is change. It's always changing. Things are always happening, right? It doesn't stay still. Motion, events. So, and that's the challenge, is the constant sort of, we have the virus comes along. We have political chaos, things that happen. We have private, events happening in our own private lives that can be big or small. The coffee machine breaks or something, computer locks up, big things, small things. And the bottom line is then that consequently, we often feel like we're living in a chaotic situation. And what Lao Tzu observed is that the fact that the world is chaotic often compels us to be chaotic, and it's not possible to be happy if you are chaotic, if you are as a sort of changing and all over the place as the world is. So let me go ahead and share my screen for a bit, and we'll take a look at this very lousy PowerPoint that I put together that one day I will offer students millions of extra credit points for making much better. So as I said, it's not a book of poetry. It's a how-to book. And here are the two key words. The first is change. and the world is full of change. Things are constantly changing. Good things happen, bad things happen, terrible things happen. The second keyword is balance. And according to Lao Tzu, the ambition and actually the purpose of the book is to help the reader understand how to achieve balance for the self in a world of change, right? And that fundamentally is the purpose of Taoism, balance. That is, if you will, its theory of happiness is to be balanced, to not be as chaotic as the world, which is easy to become. You know, when I had to drive to campus, when I had to commute, you know, I'd be on these freeways and people tailgating me, chaos around, and I often found myself agitated and chaotic in the way that the traffic was agitated and chaotic. And so Lao Tzu is trying to offer me a way out of that chaos so the world can be whatever it is. I'm in a state of balance. And this was Brad's point, right? When he was going through divorce and very upset, and he felt like his life was chaotic and out of control. And he determined, I'm going to die if I cannot find a way to achieve balance in my life. Okay, so good to have those two ideas in mind as we now turn to the book itself. So yeah, the secret to happiness is to learn to have balance in a world of change. The title, Tao Te Ching, the typical English translation for that title is the Book of the Way. The Book of the Way. The book of what way? Well, the way to live, the way to be, the way of things, the way of the world. So Tao means way, right? And that's the normal translation. If we were to normally translate the word Tao from Chinese into English, the translation would be way. Jing, as we'll see, is means book. So Book of the Way. Having said that, way, what does that connote? What does it suggest? What are meanings that we can sort of add to this simple meaning, the Book of the Way? Well, we could say the Book of the Path, right? Or we could say the Book of the Truth, because it's the true way, the truth of how things are, of the way of things. So Brad's mentor said, if you want to think of it as the Book of the Truth or the Book of the Path or whatever's fine. He even said you could think of it as the Book of Love, because according to his mentor, the person who is living the Tao, who is living the way, becomes a loving person. The person who is imbalanced, is a person who loves the world, says yes to others and to the world. They become positive and open and loving toward themselves and others and toward the world, toward all creation. So that's why I said the Book of the Way, well, it's the Book of the Way to get to a place, to a loving place or a balanced place, right? Jing means book, and so the order is reversed in the Chinese. And then we have this middle word, which is often normally translated as the book of Tao Te Ching, but also can mean something like the title also suggests apparently, or it might help you understand the title better if you think of it as the book of the process of the way, or the process of life, the book of the power of the way. So that if you live the way, the Tao, you become empowered by it. People who are living the Tao, and we'll see what that means shortly, enjoy a certain power over themselves and their lives that those who are sort of like me on the freeway yelling at other drivers, we don't have. That's not a powerful position, to be out of control, to be out of yourself, in a sense, as we'll see. Brad's mentor also talked about this concept of kung fu, which, I hear kung fu and I think of Bruce Lee beating somebody up. But kung fu, apparently in Chinese, the expression kung fu, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. The expression kung fu um, apparently suggests to have kung fu is to be very skilled at something. And it's a particular type of skill. It's the type of skill that one acquires through careful practice. And so what Brad's mentor would say is that the person who is living the Tao has kung fu, which means they become empowered. And so he actually, when Brad gave the lecture, he told the story of one time he was in China with his mentor, and they went to dinner, and the mentor rarely spoke. They mostly just meditated and studied the book together. But sometimes he would speak to Brad, although he would rarely speak while they were eating. But on this particular occasion, they were eating, and suddenly the mentor stopped and sort of tapped his bowl with his chopsticks and said to Brad, "This chef has kung fu." And Brad understood what he meant by that. What he meant was that when the chef is cooking, the chef is living the Tao, is living the way, and consequently is a powerful, is a skilled chef. So what does that mean? The chef has kung fu. How does one acquire this skill? Brad's mentor would also talk about Tiger Woods when Tiger Woods would play golf. And this was, 10 years ago when Tiger Woods was the best golfer ever. Brad's mentor said, that's what Kung Fu looks like. That's what the Tao looks like. Watch Tiger Woods play golf. Because when he would play golf, he was balanced. When the chef was a chef, he was balanced. And so here's the sort of key point that Lao Tzu wants us to understand how one achieves that balance. And so let me go back to sharing the screen here. How do you achieve the balance? Two key ideas for how you achieve the balance: yi and qi. Now, you guys might have heard the word qi, your qi, which is sort of like your life force. Oh, your qi is very strong today. You're healthy. You're physically healthy. Your qi is strong. Your yi, maybe we haven't heard of, but your yi is not like your physical life force, but your yi is your mind, specifically your awareness. And Brad used the example of, he said, okay, everybody in the class, close your eyes for a moment. You can do this if you'd like. He said, close your eyes for a moment. Everybody close their eyes. He said, now, and we're sitting in the classroom at the time, of course. He said, imagine that you are in your bedroom. And so everybody had sitting in the classroom with their eyes closed. He said, now with your eyes closed, look around your bedroom. You could try this by putting yourself in your classroom, maybe instead of your bedroom. Go to somewhere where you're not. And he said, sort of look around that room. You're not physically there. Your qi is not there. But your yi, send your yi there. Send your awareness there. So they closed their eyes and he said, look at the bed, look at the closet. Is the floor messy? What do you have next to the bed? What's hanging on the walls? And the students would sort of look around and they said, okay, open your eyes. And he asked them, so where were you just now? And they said, well, I was in my bedroom. And he said, yes, your yi was in your bedroom. Your awareness, this idea right here, your mind was in your bedroom. But your qi, your body, was here. And then he said, what you just did, you separated your yi and your qi. That is bad. The whole point of the book and of Tai Chi meditation, which is associated with Taoism, is to learn to keep your yi with your qi. So let's go back to the example I gave of me driving down the freeway yelling at other drivers. right? I'm driving along and I'm driving along and I'm aware this guy behind me is tailgating me. And I'm like, this guy is tailgating, I'm getting agitated, looking in my rearview mirror. My mind is back there yelling at this guy. My awareness is there, but I'm in my car. And now, because I've separated my awareness, my mind is somewhere else. I'm not just focusing, I'm not right here just focusing on driving. My mind's all over the place. I'm out of balance. And so, when he's talking about Kung Fu, the chef has Kung Fu because when the chef is cooking, we'll say his mind, her mind, whatever the case may be, is right here with the body, focusing on what they're doing, not distracted, not thinking about what happened yesterday, not thinking about what they're going to do later, focused on being a chef, cutting the carrots, whatever it is. Tiger Woods playing golf, focused. His yi is right here with his chi. He's in balance. He's not distracted. He has Kung Fu. Anyone who's really good at something, playing a musical instrument, a sport, Stephen Curry playing basketball, his mind is clear and in his body. He plays well because he's not, as he's playing, thinking about something else, sending his yi to some other place. The problem so many of us have is our minds are always somewhere else, right? We're on our phones. Now we're on somebody else's Instagram and looking at their picture, and we're there with them instead of being present in our own life. So the whole book is a series of passages that are all exploring this concept of balance so that you have Kung Fu in your life. You're empowered. You're not chaotic, bouncing all over the place, distracted, unable to focus and be good at something, right? It's really hard to do something well if your mind is somewhere else. So this Brad realizes his problem, right? In his relationships, in his professional life, always in the past, in the future, anxious. Let's really even talk about this. If you're living in the past, you're going to be unhappy. If your yi is in the past, a relationship, marriage, it's fallen apart. Brad's thinking about that. Well, now your yi is not here. It's in the past. Your yi is not with your chi. You're out of balance. You're unhappy. We put our yi in the future, right? You guys, students. Oh, I have to pass this class. I have to write this essay. I have to read this book. I have to graduate from college. I have to get a job, right? And we feel overwhelmed and anxious. And what's happening is the minute you separate your yi with your chi, Lao Tzu would say, you lose your Kung Fu and you become unbalanced and anxious and distressed. Usually, if we put notice there's a pattern, if we put our yi in the past, we become sad. Even if we're thinking about something good that happened, because now it's not happening, and now we're sad that, oh yeah, I wish that was happening. If we put our yi in the future, we become anxious. Oh no, how am I going to write this essay? I've got to read this book. Anxiety. Graduate. Don't do it, is Lao Tzu's argument. Now, of course, inevitably, memory, life as it is, we're going to do it sometimes. But his point is that, according to him, most people are doing it all the time. And consequently, they have no balance and they're unhappy. And that unhappiness manifests itself as depression, addiction, all kinds of different ways. Because their yi and their chi are constantly torn apart. They have no balance in their life. They're unhappy. So, how does one do this? Well, one is you learn a meditative practice. You learn to, for Brad, Tai Chi meditation is the way that every day he practices just putting his mind right here with his body. But he also plays the piano. For him, that's a form of meditation, right? For me, writing or reading or even teaching, where I'm present. And that's when I feel for myself good about my life. I have some kung fu, a little bit. All of us hopefully have found something that we can do that makes us happy and feel balanced and not stressed or unhappy or not sad. Why? Because when we're doing it, and it might be drawing or painting or playing a musical instrument or gardening or cooking or whatever it might be. Even watching a movie might be a time of just, okay, now I'm here, right? I'm not somewhere else. Conversation. So in the course of the book, Lao Tzu offers a series of different themes to help his readers understand how to achieve this balance, according to Brad and his mentor. And Brad presented, when he gave the lecture, 8 themes. So I'm going to give them to you now and briefly explain them. All right. Hopefully we're following along. Unfortunately, I can't ask you if you have any questions. Let's go back to the presentation. Brad's 8 themes. So yes, you learn meditative practice to help you learn to do this. And the book itself can help you learn to do it. So Brad's 8 themes, right? The first theme is welcome home. This was the first thing that Brad's mentor said to him when he got to China. And it sounds funny. Brad said it was funny because he showed up at this guy's apartment in the middle of this huge city in China. And when he arrived, he opened the door and the mentor said to him, Brad. And he said, yeah. He said, welcome home. And at this point, Brad thought, welcome home? What are you talking about? I'm in China, halfway around the world. But his point was wherever you are, that is your home. Your chi, your body, your life energy is your home. Your home is not, your home, your apartment building, your home where your family lives. Your home needs to be yourself. That's where you need to live. And if your mind thinks some other place is home and you're not there, then it'll be impossible for you to be balanced in your life. You're going to be unhappy. So you have to change your idea of where home is, make it yourself, and live there. And Brad said this idea for him was very powerful. He had spent his life, still kind of does this a little bit, frankly, moving. He moved a lot. In fact, about 3 months ago, he moved again from New York City to a small town in the Catskills in upstate New York. But hopefully holding on to this idea that no matter where you go, that's where you are, and that needs to be your home. And Brad realized, I got to quit thinking that happiness is going to be somewhere else other than with me. Right. So that was the first idea. Welcome home. Second idea. Small steps. So this is a big one for students. Lao Tzu said, you're making a mistake if you think big. Don't think about passing this class. Don't think about graduating from college. Think about the one thing you need to do today that you can do to help you progress in whatever direction you want to go. But if you're sitting obsessing over, I've got to read this whole book, it can be overwhelming and paralyzing. So Lao Tzu would say, don't worry about reading the whole book, read one chapter. That you can do, right? To keep things manageable. And as he says in the book, it's through small steps that all great things are accomplished. So focus on the small. Don't focus on the big, putting yourself in the future. Focus on the small, what you can do right now that's manageable. It reminds me of professional athletes all the time when they're being interviewed. I used to watch sports, and a game would end, and they would interview a player, and the player would, they would say that they'd interview them and say, "Oh, your team's doing very well. It looks like you're progressing nicely to make the playoffs," or something like that. And the player would inevitably say the same thing in response. Whenever they talk about, playoffs or make it to the championship, whatever, the player would always say, one game at a time, one day at a time. We're not focusing on the playoffs. We're focusing on the game we have tomorrow. And by focusing on the small, manageable thing, that's how you make it to the playoffs. That's how you win the championship. You don't go out, you win the championship. You win each play. You win each moment. And the moment is manageable. The big stuff isn't. Your yin and your qi can be together in the moment. They cannot be together for some big thing. So I can say, I've got to learn how to play guitar. No, learn how to play this chord. Learn how to play this note. Learn how to play this chorus of this song. Don't worry about learning to play guitar. I've got to pass English 1A. No, you've got to listen to this lecture, right? You've got to take notes on this chapter. I've got to write an essay. Well, write a sentence. Just write the first sentence. Start the document. Write a sentence. Another sentence. Another sentence. That's all manageable. And then boom, you've written the essay. All right. So small steps are very important to this idea of living in the present, putting your yi with your qi. Next one has to do with anger. Lao Tzu observed that many people are angry, that anger destroys many people's lives. And Lao Tzu said the answer to anger is humility. This to me is a really intriguing idea. One moment. Lao Tzu doesn't say, don't be angry. He says, be humble. If you are humble, you won't be angry. Sounds like Kendrick Lamar, right? Be humble. What does he mean by that? He says that the angry person lacks humility, because why do we get angry? We get angry because there's something happening that we can't control. And what Lao Tzu says is, instead of being angry that you can't control it, you should humbly recognize that you can't control it. Anger means you think that arrogantly you should be able to control this other person, or this politician, or the referee in the game who just made a bad call, or the guy tailgating you on the freeway. And you're angry. I'm angry because I can't control him. And Lao Tzu would say, well, what made you think you could? You're so arrogant, you imagine that you should somehow be able to control another person's life. So you can't control them. Be humble, humbly recognize that, and then you won't get angry with them. So often we get angry at people because we want to be able to control them, but we can't. And Lao Tzu would say, well, of course you can't. It's another person. In fact, there's nothing in the world that you can control except for one thing, your yi. Learn to control that. Everything else ultimately is out of your control. This computer could break right now on me. I get angry. Well, look, why get angry over something I can't control? Well, so it broke. Right? Now, this is very easy to say. But Lao Tzu's solution to your anger is not to, is to tell you, recalibrate how strong you think you are. Recognize that you have no power over things that are outside of you. Look at a big earthquake right now. Get your virus today. We are powerless. There's one thing we might have power over, and that's ourselves. But that's all you need to be balanced, is power over yourself, power over your mind, power over your chi to the extent that you can. Even that's kind of out of your control. You get that virus and now your chi isn't in a great place. But if you can learn to discipline your mind humbly, recognize that you cannot control anything except your mind, then you'll stop getting angry all the time when something happens that you couldn't control, like another person, um, did something you couldn't control. Well, they did that. I can't control it. I'm not going to get angry. I humbly recognize that I don't have power over another person. So that's a very important theme in Lao Tzu, the value of humility. It's one of the qualities he insists a person must have in order to have balance. And I have observed in my life, frankly, I think the current president is a good example of this. People who lack humility tend to be angry people. And people who are humble tend to not be angry. And so that's why Lao Tzu emphasizes that point. Step number 4, I should maybe go a little faster here. What I have is what I need. So in order to have balance and happiness in your life, all you need is what you have, which is yourself, your yi and your qi. Obviously, enough food, shelter, and sleep to take care of your qi. Hopefully you have that. But many of us get caught up on things that we want instead of need. And then we put our happiness in those external things that we thought we needed, but in fact we just wanted. And then those things get stolen, break, something, happens to them. And then we need something else, and we need something else, and need something else. So we're in a constant state of imbalance. Consumerism is definitely not Lao Tzu's recommended way of living. There will never be enough if you think that something outside of yourself is going to make you happy, because it won't, it can't. Because you'll recognize, because it's not you, now it's out of your control. And that new car that you got, the new iPhone, the new Air Jordans, whatever it might be, that you thought was going to make you happy, it does for a minute, and then it just becomes more and more something you realize is not you. And then you look for another thing, and it's never there. What you have is what you need, and what you have is yourself, and that's all you need. Love life. In this respect, Taoism is different from many religions. Many religions think very much about the future. It's not about loving your life today. Today is suffering. Today is pain. But someday you'll be in paradise. Someday you'll be in heaven. Lao Tzu says, don't live in the future. Live in this life. Love life and love today. Enjoy your life. Love life. Love the moment. Enjoy this moment now today. Brad goes back to what I have is what I need. He likes a nice bottle of wine as much as anyone. He likes to enjoy his life, love life, enjoy it, enjoy the pleasures of life. Do not practice systematic self-denial unnecessarily. He likes to have a nice stereo, nice clothes. Yeah, but don't need them. Right? Don't need them. Enjoy them, but don't need them. I hope these things are making sense. He certainly made sense when he gave the lecture. This one I am not practicing. One of the themes that you'll see Lao Tzu repeating in the book is the value of silence. We talk too much noise. And often our speech is really a desire to control others. So we talk, trying to control them, how they think, how they see us. Lao Tzu would say, don't. You can't. Be quiet. Learn to enjoy silence. The person who cannot enjoy silence, who needs to be distracted, who cannot sit quietly, who needs to speak, who needs to be on their phone, needs to text, who needs something, that person is not balanced. A sign that you are balanced is your ability to be silent. An interesting bit of advice, obviously, for a teacher who spends far too much time talking. But Lao Tzu would say, shh, quiet down, Eric. Too much talking. Let go of trying to control your students, trying to control the world. Be quiet. So that's a theme worth paying attention to in some of the passages we look at. Finally, the eighth theme, don't live in the past. You'll see a lot of this in Lao Tzu and in the Tao Te Ching. Don't live in the past. Let go. If bad things have happened to you, look, and this is really easy to say, it's not easy to do, but if you can't do it, you will not have balance. So ultimately, you need to bring your yi out of the past into the present moment. Forgive, let go, move on. Maybe that includes forgiving yourself. It's done. The past is done. You cannot control it. Living in the past will make you sad. So don't live there. Live in the present, yi with your chi, balance. Not necessarily happiness. You'll have tough days, but you will have balance as you deal with those tough days. Brad also, in addition to the themes that he got from his mentor, he proposed 4 other themes or important ideas that he has taken from the book. One is, I am alone. Now, Brad said for him that idea terrified him, and he spent his whole life trying to not be alone. And yet we are alone. Our yi and our chi belong to us alone. They cannot join with someone else's. You know, you've maybe had the experience of sitting with someone and they're sitting there and you might ask them, what are you thinking about right now? Maybe a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? What are you thinking about? And you have to ask them that because your yi is not their yi. So you don't know where their mind is because you're alone. Your yi is alone and theirs is alone. But you might ask them, what are you thinking about? And they say, oh, I'm thinking about you, sweetheart. Really? Yes, yes. Okay. Well, you'll never know, will you? Why? Because you are alone. And Brad said that terrified him, but he said, but actually, he now sees that as empowering. Because if his yi is alone, it means that he has control over his own life. Someone else does not control it. And that gives him power over his own life that he would not otherwise have if he were not alone. Now, does this mean that Brad likes to spend all day, every day alone? Of course not. He likes to be with others. But he stops feeling that he is somehow incomplete if he is alone. This is a controversial idea, and I'm not sure if Lao Tzu is right, that it's possible for us to really be alone and be happy. But in any case, it is an idea that the book wants to say, look, you are ultimately alone in this universe. Your yin and your chi are separate from all others. Having said that, he also says you're not alone. You are part of everything. So in any case, it's one of the ideas that Brad pointed out. I'm not sure about that one, but he said for him it was an important thing to accept. Keep doing that. Helped him understand what is inside and what is outside. You know, we often mistake something that as being inside It's actually outside. For example, how other people feel about us. And we think that that somehow is us. And we get worried about it. But ultimately, Brad had to recognize, look, how my ex-wife feels about me is outside of me. It's not something that I can be responsible for or control. I can't control it, so I can't be responsible for something I can't control. So I'm not responsible for how she feels. So I should stop obsessing over how she feels, because it is outside of me. Things are outside of me. So they ultimately cannot give me balance. What is inside? My mind, my chi. That's what I should focus on learning to control. This is the same as that. Lao Tzu is big on this one. According to him, we often think that things that are very different, we often think things are very different. In fact, according to him, they are not so different. So you'll see in one of the passages that we look at, I think, there's a passage where he says, what difference between success and failure? And you might think, big difference, right? Lao Tzu would say, no, not such a big difference. They're the same. You could say, how can success and failure be the same? And so Lao Tzu might ask, has there ever been a great success in your life that was not preceded by failure? The learning process. And of course, you're trying to become a better writer, a lot of mistakes, a lot of, setbacks, a better athlete, a better musician, a better skateboarder, a lot of falling, right? A lot of falling down, a lot of failure. So then he would say, so if success required failure, are they not the same? Are they not one? So what he wants to do is he wants to, I think, remove a lot of the anxiety about failure and to understand it is part of any success. And so don't live in the past and get stuck in the failure. See it as the same as your success. I'm not sure that I'm explaining that very well, but that's what I understood that to mean. Finally, Brad ended on this note. He just drew a line on the board and he said, this is the Tao. Ultimately, it is not something that you can share, that you can put clearly into words and point at and say, that's the Tao. It is ultimately a mystery that one discovers for themselves that cannot be explained in a list. When you live the Tao, when you have that Kung Fu, that's when you recognize it. That's when you know it. And it's not something you can put into words. So Brad said, I come here, I stand in front of you, I talk to you about the Tao, and you think, okay, so that's the way, live in the present, da 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 da. But he said, ultimately, though, it's not something that words can capture. The words can help us approach it, sort of like a guide. But ultimately, the Tao, in fact, Tao number one, the very first one, the Tao that can be told, the way that can be told, is not the eternal Tao. It's not the eternal way. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. And I see how if a student picked this up and started reading, they'd be like, what? So that's what Lao Tzu is starting the book, oddly enough, by saying, what I am going to name for you in this book This way that I'm going to describe for you in the book is not ultimately the way. The way will be something that you know when you live it, when you experience it. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. So that last line is meant to say, it's a mystery. You will arrive at. How you get there? You will arrive there when you are free from desire. Well, what does that mean, free from desire? That goes back to what you have is what you need. You don't need to spend your life desiring more, more, more. Free of that, now it's possible to live the mystery of the Tao. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. So you see signs of the mystery, but you don't see the mystery itself. Yet mystery and manifestations arrive from the same source. The source is called darkness. So there is something obscure and dark and unapproachable about the Tao. But in here, he'll say anyone can be a master of the Tao. In fact, throughout here, he'll talk about the master, and the master is each one of us. We are all capable of living the way right now, today, in this moment. But you wouldn't then be able to just explain it. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. Darkness is the gateway to understanding. So we pass through the confusion and the darkness, and when you arrive at the Tao, you know it, but you won't be able to tell anybody else about it, ironically. So what I'm hoping is that these themes, as we read different passages over the final 3 weeks of class, these themes help you understand the passages so that they are less bewildering. Because, you read that first one, you're like, huh? So keep them in mind. That is Brad's lecture on the Tao Te Ching. Very weird for me to sit and say it into a computer screen. I much prefer sitting with you, talking with you about it, sharing ideas. But I will now be posting some reflections for you to do on different passages of the Tao Te Ching. And so I hope the time you spent listening to this lecture will help you with those reflections and might help you better appreciate this extraordinary book. All right. Thank you for listening.